So I am here with Adam Kokesh, who is one of the candidates for the Libertarian Party nomination for President of the United States. And I am going to ask him a series of questions. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible myself so that he can talk as much as possible. So let's get right into the questions here. My first question is, tell us about your background. So your educational background, your career history, and your political background.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say thanks for doing this, Chuck, and for everything that you do for the party. I know you've been a longtime activist, and you've really put a lot of effort into this, and it's very appropriate to create this new venue with what you're doing to interview presidential candidates in this format. So I greatly appreciate and appreciate what you're doing and being included in it in this way. And I do have one disclaimer for the audience I got to start with here. Well, actually, I really have two. But I know you're going to let me get to the second one later, so I'll hold that. But first, about my appearance today, I am getting married this Friday, and we are getting married off grid. My love, Samantha, and myself, and we are at our homestead, the Garden of Freedom. And I have a lot of field work to do to get the area ready. So today I am splitting boulders and rearranging big rocks and making tire walls and doing all sorts of other fun prep stuff for that. So to answer your question, by way of my becoming a libertarian, I think is the best way to answer and cover all the other elements of your question. And I was born in San Francisco, raised in the Bay Area, mostly around San Mateo, kind of upper middle class. My mom was Canadian. Don't tell anybody. I'm half Jewish and half Canadian. No one will vote for me in America if those things get out. But no, my mother, her background was that her parents left Austria and Hungary before Hitler came through. For obvious reasons, they were Jewish, and they couldn't come to the United States. Another thing where, like, you know, reasonable immigration policy with respect for freedom of movement would have been nice in my own family history. And my grandparents settled in Montreal, Canada. They didn't even tell their kids that they were Jewish and raised them fake Presbyterian. And my mom was always, vaguely liberal, but distinctly anti-authority. And my father, he grew up on a ranch in Wyoming, distinctly anti-authority, but vaguely conservative, and he holds on to some of that sentiment to this day. I think they both do, and I would quote Larry Sharp, of course, to put this in perspective, that a libertarian is someone who says you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want, as long as you don't force it on anybody else. And I think they really embodied that in a lot of ways, but they weren't conscientiously libertarian enough to raise me with a healthy skepticism of militarism. And so I ended up joining the Marine Corps at age 17 in the delayed entry program. And at the time, I identified as a libertarian, but I got the version of the message that was, some would say, the watered down, politicized version. I would think fundamentally perverted when you say it's about socially liberal, fiscally conservative, because it's trying to buy into the left-right framework and be a better version of it, as opposed to saying, like, no, libertarianism transcends that. It's ethics applied to politics. But because I didn't get that better version of the message, that principled version of the message, I still joined the Marine Corps. I still enlisted at age 17, delayed entry. And I guess I should say one other thing about my pre-Marine background is that in high school, I got kicked out of a school for possession of alcohol in my sophomore year, and ended up my last 2 years at the Native American Prep School, where I was one of 63 students with 32 different tribes represented. And I was the only non-native student to have ever attended the school, which sadly shut down the year after I graduated. And at some point in high school, I had a teacher who said, well, do you want to be a Republican or Democrat? And I was like, what? Like, I don't have a choice. Like, I got to be totally freaking lame. And they said, well, there's these libertarians over here. They like to be left alone. And yeah, and I was like, okay, yeah. I was a punk kid. No, all right, yeah, leave me alone. Libertarian sounded nice, but that did not stop me from enlisting in the Marine Corps. That did not. I believe that the Marine Corps had a net effect of peace on the world at the time, and it was a recklessly naive and irresponsible decision to sign up to kill for politicians while not looking into what that really meant and what the real history of the U.S. military or militarism in general is. And I volunteered to go to Iraq. I was in Fallujah in 2004. And I went reserves. I got to back up for a second and say I went and joined the reserves because my parents very much expected me to go to college. My dad went to Harvard. My mom went to Wellesley. That was where they met, both academic overachievers. And they had that expectation for me. So I joined the reserves while going to college. And then I did my semester abroad in Fallujah in 2004, and it was a very influential experience, obviously. And the story that has the most impact that I like to tell, I can't say I really like or enjoy telling it, but it's a very important one to tell, is that I was asked to guard detainees one night during the siege of Fallujah in 2004. And these were young men who were just trying to get out of a city that was under near constant bombardment. C-130 Spectre gunships, which is artillery from the sky, rained down on this relatively small city, Fallujah, Iraq, the city of mosques. And they had been caught trying to escape and had been put in the guard shack by what we called the Brooklyn Bridge. There were two bridges over the Euphrates River, the George Washington and the Brooklyn, and that was where the Blackwater security agents had been ambushed and had their bodies strung up and burned on international television. And that was what precipitated the siege of Fallujah. I was there for the first battle of 2004, not the second. When people say the Battle of Fallujah, they normally mean the second Battle of Fallujah, which was the real when they swept through the city. I was just there for the siege, the first Battle of Fallujah, as it's sometimes referred to. And those men were sat in the guard shack with zip ties, with their hands behind their backs and sandbags over their heads, covering their faces. And they were sat cross-legged on a cement floor, not allowed to move, not allowed to nod off and fall asleep, not allowed to get up to go to the bathrooms. And by the time I got to them, they were, let's just say, in pretty bad shape. And technically, according to the military at the time, that's not torture. It's not a stress position, but I dare you to try it. You will find yourself in an unbearable amount of pain and discomfort relatively quickly, seated like that. And it really was sick. And I went there with the intention of helping people. I genuinely went with the best spirit possible of going in civil affairs and wanting to help people and to be asked to do that. And I feel very, I'm disappointed in myself that I did not disobey, that I did not question in the face of that cruelty that I was a part of, whether or not those were lawful orders. And they were not. I should have disobeyed them. And I knew that, if I disobeyed, that I would have faced serious consequences as if they were lawful orders. But it didn't even cross my mind. And that that militarism can pervert the best of intentions of individuals has been a big part of what motivated me. And when I got out of the Marines, graduated college, I moved to DC to get a master's in political management at George Washington University. And I joined Iraq Veterans Against the War. I never finished my master's degree. It's never too late to drop out. And I ran away with the circus known as the anti-war movement in Iraq Veterans Against the War. It was a very compelling time when there were people dying in Iraq. And I could really directly feel that if more Americans knew my story, less people would die. And that's an incredibly compelling thing to experience. So, and that was really what turned me into a true full-time activist. And that was when I got out of the Marines, November 30, 2006. So kind of from then on, it's been about 13 years of full-time activism with Iraq Veterans Against the War, running for Congress, Adam versus the Man is a radio show, then a TV show, then successful YouTube channel, then going to jail over and over again throughout my career as an activist in civil disobedience. I think I'm most known for that. Not quite a household name like John McAfee, the only other candidate who really has that quality, but at least most Americans would recognize me and go, oh, the guy with the shotgun, or the guy who was dancing at the Jefferson. And it's kind of nice to go out in public and be recognized by strangers and appreciated for something so beautiful as that. Because I have people who come up to me on the street all the time, when I'm out, even just, grocery shopping or, at events, whatever it is, even when it's not a political thing. Hey, aren't you that guy who, and then you inspired me to do this with my job or my career or my life or my family or living off grid like we are here. So Chuck, there's more I could unpack. I don't know how much you want to get into the political stuff, but just to wrap up the political transformation here, it was reading Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard that got me to the bottom of the rabbit hole. And there was a lot of stuff that got me ready for that. Ron Paul, of course, everything I was involved with the Libertarian Party before that, even in college. I think the only point you're wrong is when you think you've reached the bottom of the rabbit hole, because there really is no bottom. You can keep learning and keep growing and keep expanding your worldview. There is kind of a bottom of the rabbit hole on freedom, on voluntarism, on getting, I think, that core of the ethical message of Rothbard. I think, and at that point you go, sorry, getting
Okay there?
no, I was just getting a
well, now you seem muted. Can you talk?
Yeah, we're good. I apologize. No, it's just I apologize, Chuck. I normally have my call forwarding on and it doesn't interrupt like that.
Oh, okay. Your sound has gotten lower, I guess. Did you change something with your microphone settings?
No, but I will, if you want to vamp for 10 seconds, I will disconnect and call right back.
No, that's okay. I don't know if it's just how close you are to the microphone or what, but something changed, whatever it was. I don't know. Well, can you keep talking so we can hear your levels, I guess? I can't hear you. Can you say something now? That is not good. Maybe you should call back then. We could try that.
Yeah, let me just back.
Are you there, Adam? Okay. So, you might be calling back. I can turn this off for now. While we are dealing with that, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm here with Adam Kokesh, who is one of the candidates for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination. He was telling us about his background, and Adam is...
Hey, Chuck, can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah. Can you talk a little more? Can you hear me, Adam?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. That's not good. Adam, I'm talking. Can you hear me? Adam?
Yes. How about now?
Okay. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit?
All right. All better.
Okay.
Yes. All back.
You're still a little low, but we'll just roll with it. So
I apologize for the interruption.
No problem. So let's. You talked about your background, but I think you mentioned a few things that you kind of assumed people would know about that maybe we want to unpack a little bit. So you talked about
Sure.
dancing at the Jefferson Memorial. Can you like briefly tell us about that?
Sure, that's a really fun civil disobedience story. If you don't mind taking it back to the beginning, there were a group of libertarians who went out to celebrate Jefferson's birthday with a flash mob dance party at midnight on his birthday. And the United States Park Police who were there asked them to leave. And the one of the young women in the group was like, she was dancing as she was leaving, and one of the cops just grabbed her from behind and said, "You're under arrest." And 3 years later, after a legal battle, a lot of back and forth, a judge upheld the conviction, saying that it was not appropriately reverent enough. And this is for the champion of freedom of speech, Thomas Jefferson, at his monument, which is filled with beautiful inscriptions about freedom, and obviously especially freedom of speech and expression and religion, and all of the wonderful things that Jefferson stood for. And so a couple of friends of mine, a couple of great activists, Jared Denman and Eddie Free, they said, well, we're going to have a Jefferson dance party then, civil disobedience. You're going to tell us that we can't dance here, then this is where we are going to dance. And so that was really motivating, inspiring for me. I had the TV show Adam versus the Man at the time out of Washington, D.C., and hooked up with them and started promoting it and went out there. And it was really shocking what a preemptive police presence they had there for a dance party. And a bunch of us were kind of gathered around. We had people scattered throughout, and we started dancing when the time came after this cop sort of warned us. This is just a warning. If you dance, you're going to get arrested. And we were like, well, for what? He said, you'll find out. It's like Nancy Pelosi, you know, with Obamacare. You can see what's in the legislation after it passes. Well, this was really just obscene. We got it all on video. And we started dancing, me and Jared and Eddie and Tyga Berry and Medea Benjamin from Code Pink were there. And, you know, we danced, and we were the Jefferson Five who got arrested together. And the video, in the video, I was the last one to get arrested, and I was listening to "You Can Do It" by Ice Cube, and I was kind of dancing away from the cops actually, and this one of them came up and grabbed me from behind by the waist, picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and in midair grabbed me by the throat and choke slammed me onto the marble. And if I didn't know how to fall, like tuck the chin, slap the ground, like I learned in Marine Corps martial arts program, McMap, I would have rolled my head back and split my head open on the marble. And it was a pretty dramatic video. You see his knee going into my ribs, and you go, holy crap, I didn't know ribs were that flexible. And none of them broke, but it was pretty brutal. I did get banged up a bit in this. And the video went super, super viral. My version got 2 million views, but it got ripped a dozen different places that got, 500,000 to 1 million views. So a lot of times people know me as the guy from the dance video at the Jefferson Monument.
So tell me about Adam versus the Man, how that came about, and where it was broadcast, and the iterations that you've had of that show.
Oh man, I've never been asked that question in an interview, because it's a really interesting one, and we are on, I think, version 10.0 right now. Version 1.0 was the radio show, and it was because I ran for Congress, and I'm not supposed to admit this in a libertarian primary, right? But I ran for Congress as a Republican, and at the time, I was already a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party, but I was asked to run as a Republican by Dr. Ron Paul himself. I think any of us would have taken that opportunity, and he would only support and endorse Republican candidates. So I had his support and endorsement in 2010 running for Congress in New Mexico. And I couldn't shut up when the race was over, so I got a radio show on AM 1550 KIV, more positive talk radio Albuquerque. And it was a lot of fun. I loved that first version of Adam versus the Man. I had a volunteer producer who, Dustin DeLellis, did an amazing job. And we did that for about 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I wasn't selling ads. I was working with my father's cannabis growing business that unfortunately, due to legal intervention in New Mexico, didn't really go anywhere. But we got picked up for a TV show with RT America, Russia Today, and so I did that. And that would have been version 2.0 of Adam versus the Man out of Washington, D.C. And I was on the air for 4 months before I was canceled for being critical of Putin. And I wasn't especially critical, but fairly as any libertarian should have been in covering world events. And they canceled my show right before the midterm election that he stole so blatantly. And I think there was reason to that timing, but without being too conspiracy theory minded, doesn't matter. I got my show canceled after 4 months on the air after being told that I would have absolute editorial control. And while I was on the air, they generally respected that. And so I went independent and focused on my YouTube channel for a while around Occupy Wall Street, started doing man on the street videos. This is, maybe the other thing I'm known for is my Socratic dialogue man on the street videos. And the Socratic dialogue technique of asking questions and leading people to their own conclusions, or at very least to confront their own cognitive dissonance. And for libertarians, this is so important when we're talking to statists and we want to expose the contradictions in their worldview and do it in a way that they are receptive to it, as opposed to they're fighting it. Because if you argue, you tell someone something, they're going to resist. But if you ask them questions and they come to the conclusion on their own, then it's something that's really burned into their understanding and a lot easier to accept. And if they don't, as is often the case when you're pointing a camera at somebody, like I do with my videos, you end up having some very interesting confrontations with that cognitive dissonance and putting people on the spot. And a lot of people really like the embarrass the statists kind of nature of those videos. And then got into more regular production, and it kind of blew up in that golden era of independent media production. And I got to the point where we were doing a 3-hour daily live show with live guests and live callers with video, and a 20-minute scripted show 5 days a week. And that was a really intense production schedule. I don't think it's been possible in the meantime. And I don't know, Chuck, if you really want to get into this, or if you want to talk more policy, but when it comes to media and social media and the internet and all of the different regulation and censorship, and how what I have experienced makes me not only uniquely capable of understanding the challenges that we face as libertarians in the new media landscape, but also doing something about it. And I have a pretty good track record, I would say, certainly better than any other candidate except maybe John McAfee, for having an impact in changing culture and reaching people with the libertarian message. And a big part of it is having that Socratic dialogue attitude of really reaching people where they're at and being loving and compassionate and spreading the message. And that's always been a big part of Adam versus the Man. So then I went to jail for 4 months for the shotgun civil disobedience. And that, I don't know, I guess that was Adam versus the Man 6 or 7.0, where we recorded my phone calls from jail and released those as podcasts. My great girlfriend at the time, Carrie Wedler, did an amazing job helping me stay in production while I was locked up. And then I got out, and a lot of things were up in the air. I had to leave Virginia and moved to California, did the show there as a live show again, 3 hours, 5 days a week. And then when I wrote the book Freedom, which I started in jail, but when I finished and released it, I decided to focus on that. And Adam versus the Man became kind of a side project to the book to be able to focus on freedom, because I figured it was a more effective way of waking people up. And there was a time when the internet censorship of shadow banning and throttling was so bad that it was like, well, all right, screw it then. I'll go analog. I'll go pass books out. And now we're building Adam versus the Man back up as version 10.0. And it's the idea is to do a 2-hour live show with live guests and live callers. And right now I've got a co-host and a producer. I'm really excited that we just brought them on board. And there's a lot of good stuff happening. It's unfortunate that we don't get to keep touring and getting to hang out with people like you at Libertarian Party state conventions all over the country. But the silver lining is I get more time at my beautiful homestead here at the Garden of Freedom. I get to put more time into media production and other side projects, but that diversion of effort now towards building back my online media and social media presence is a significant part of getting ready for the general election and being able to have the most impact there.
So, do you have executive or managerial experience from your career history that you think would transfer to help you be president and be executive over this wide range of departments?
Well, that's a great question, Chuck, and I guess I'm going to have to give up my second disclaimer here, because it said I'm not really running to be president. Yes, I am running for president, and I'm giving the American people a very, very serious alternative here. But anytime I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, I throw up in my mouth a little bit, because you really have to be some kind of psychopath, even a benevolent one, to want this power over other human beings that shouldn't exist. And as a libertarian, who's a libertarian? I'm a libertarian because I'm an ethicist. I believe in self-ownership. I believe in the non-aggression principle, and that these are fundamental ethical principles behind libertarianism that should not be compromised under any circumstances. And based on those principles, this is the only ethical platform to say, if you give me the ring of power, I'm going to throw it directly into the fire. So my platform is the peaceful, orderly, responsible dissolution of the United States federal government in a bankruptcy process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations. So I'm not putting on the ring of power. So when you say, what would you do if you were president? Well, I'm not. And so in terms of executive experience, it's what is the responsibility that I'm asking for? The authority of the presidency, is huge. You say you can put your finger on the red button and drop nukes on people. You can, run the country. We know the president doesn't actually run the country, but all the powers of the presidency compared to what I'm asking for and saying we're going to dissolve the system, the discretion that I would have in carrying out a preordained bankruptcy process would be insignificant. Now, Chuck, it's that sounds like a cop-out, right? Like, hey, I'm not really going to be president, but I certainly recognize that taking the federal government through a bankruptcy process is a massive administrative process. And you want someone with significant managerial experience. You want someone with that administrative, bureaucratic leadership experience. And honestly, I don't have it. It's my biggest weakness as a candidate. Although compared to the other contenders in the Libertarian primary, the fact that I have run multiple small businesses, off-grid businesses, successful media business, getting my YouTube channel up to 250,000 subs, about 80 million views. Everything that I've done as an activist, as a merchandiser, selling Adam versus the Man gear and Freedom gear, as an author with over 250,000 copies of my book in print, over 4 million downloads at this point. All of these things speak to a certain amount of professional credibility, and I've overseen small, medium-sized staffs at various points in all of these ventures. But this is why I'm so excited to have the endorsement of John McAfee and the possibility of him as a running mate. McAfee of McAfee Antivirus, obviously, and the experience that he has and the credibility in the corporate world and the technology world, I think is the perfect complement to what I bring as the primary messenger of localization. So if you want to get into anything, more, there was a lot in there. Obviously, follow up or specifics on my background, please.
Well, my next question, I think you answered a lot of this already, but if you want to add more to it, my next question is going to be, why are you running for president?
Right. Well, I think it's really just in line with the objective of the Libertarian Party, nothing less than a world set free in our lifetime. And that has always been the objective of my activism. How do we wake up the most people? How do we free the most minds? How do we lessen the coercion in society? And that's what it's really about, is justice, serving justice. How do we serve justice in the world when government is the greatest source of injustice? I see that this is an idea whose time has come, localization. The idea of taking governments apart from the top down, decentralizing government structure. I wouldn't be doing this if it was like, well, I'm going to fight the tide. And Adam Kokesh is going to stand alone against the onslaught of socialism and communism that is the trend of humanity. And I'm going to raise the army of libertarians and we're going to fight back. No, like that's not realistic. But what is, when you take a longer view of human history, is understanding that we are in the most peaceful times in human history, and that violence follows a pretty consistent decline over the course of human history. This isn't me, my observation. This is Professor Steven Pinker from Harvard, who wrote a great book, Better Angels of Our Nature, did a great TED Talk on the subject called The Surprising Decline in Violence. And you can disagree with his interpretations, but not his facts. And to me, what this speaks to is the inevitable progress of humanity. And there might be 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, but look at how far we have come. And if you understand freedom properly, freedom is what you have when no one is forcing their will on you. Freedom is what you have when your rights are respected. If there is fraud or force or coercion or violence, violation of your self-ownership in any way, you do not have freedom. So getting to that point of a free society is really saying, let's make the world less violent. Let's make coercion less relevant. You can say that government has gotten bigger in terms of bureaucracy, but how do you measure the evil of government? Chuck, I think you've heard me do this in speeches, but the thought exercise I like to challenge libertarians with is big government always worse than small government? And how do you measure the evil of government? And thought exercise is, would you rather live under a giant government that employs half the population, but is totally peaceful, respects civil rights, only uses just enough coercion to maintain its monopoly on those services that give it the ability to employ half the population, and what it does more or less, approximates what the market would provide? It doesn't start any wars. Or would you rather live under a tiny government that employs only 1% of the population, but murders 1,000 random people every day? And you go, oh yeah, give me the big peaceful government versus the small violent government. And the point is that the evil of government is not measured just in its size as a bureaucracy, but really how much it coercively takes us away from our potential as a people, our potential as an economy, as a market, to achieve nothing but the win-win relationships of voluntary consensual exchange that make up true capitalism with respect for self-ownership as the ultimate means of production. So does that answer your question, Chuck?
Sure. How would you describe the libertarian philosophy to a voter unfamiliar with libertarians?
Libertarianism is about live and let live. As Larry Sharpe says, you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be, as long as you don't force it on anybody else. We want you to be free to exercise your rights, with the only limit being the rights of others. We don't claim to be able to centrally plan or control your life for you better than you can do it for yourself. We want you to have the freedom to have communities or government systems based on your values set up to meet your needs, and to have the freedom to opt out or create new systems at any time.
What are your top 3 issues? And let's talk about each one.
Well, I definitely have 2 pet issues. I mean, I would say if there was one overarching issue, obviously it's localization, decentralization, secession, these things, of redrawing the lines of government, saying that we don't have to live under this centralized system anymore. We don't have to be united under one government to be united in American values. And I think that is really what it's all about for me. That's the unifying one. But I do have 2 pet issues for me that are important to me, and I should sort of preface this with something I've been telling people who are members of the Libertarian Party who are concerned about what candidate would have the best messaging strategy for the general election. Of course, I would say, well, hey, look at what works. Look at what raises money. Look at what gets social media following. Look at what gets media. And I think in that realm overall, you're going to see that I have the best record of doing things with this message that work. So with the other 2 issues, it's something that's personal to me, but that I wouldn't share with people. I'm not so ego driven that it would be like, all right, well, I'm going to talk about my issues. No, what I've told people, what I've told Libertarian delegates is that I am 100% committed to my principles. I am 100% committed to libertarianism. I am 100% committed to the non-aggression principle and self-ownership. I am 100% committed to the policy of this platform that is based on, I'm going to throw the ring in the fire. I am not going to put on the ring of power. But I have no commitment whatsoever. I have no pride in authorship when it comes to messaging. I am very coachable. I'm good at surrounding myself with people who I can listen to, who can modify my message to make it more effective. But if the two things, and basically my point is, I'm going to follow the script. As the nominee, I am going to make sure that this message is presented in the most effective way possible, regardless of my personal preferences or what's worked for me in the past. But we have obviously what's worked as a great starting point. So the two pet issues that I have are one, veteran and military suicides, and two, Native American issues. And obviously being a veteran myself, I can say in my story that cannabis saved my life. I went to the VA when I got out of the Marine Corps in DC, told them I was having trouble sleeping. Walked out of there with a little brown paper bag, 5 prescriptions, 3 of them had suicide listed as a side effect. And this was just after talking to a shrink for 5 minutes. And I don't think I would have taken the pills and gotten to the point of being suicidal, but who knows, maybe the pills would have really messed me up. But because I had access to cannabis, at least somewhat at the time, and really it was more that I knew better than to get too involved with the pharmaceuticals, or at least the dangerous psychoactive ones. So I've had friends commit suicide who I knew in Iraq. Friends from the military who I wasn't in Iraq with, who deployed separately and have committed suicide. And there are really two big things in this issue that get to me. And one of them is the drug war. Obviously, if there's no victim, there's no crime. And if you criminalize something that is a victimless activity, then you are the criminal, or the person enforcing that is the criminal. You are punishing someone for doing something that they have a right to do. And that's wrong. Government is criminal on its face in the premise of the drug war, in saying that we can decide what's okay for you to put in your body and what isn't. But it's especially offensive for veterans to say, well, you fought for our freedom, but now you come home. Oh, no, you can't smoke pot. No, because that's illegal. Some kids might get it. Well, whatever, lame excuses that politicians come up with to justify the war on drugs. And I got to say, it's very exciting. And thanks to so many libertarian activists and other cannabis activists, of course, that we have cannabis mostly legal and accessible in a lot of states already. But in some places, in order to medicate with the best medicine, veterans are made criminals. They don't have safe, reliable access. And I've heard of veterans who went from cannabis to pills and ended up committing suicide largely as a result of that. Psilocybin and MDMA as alternative treatments for PTSD are just, it is one of these historical tragedies we're going to look back on, when it was, wow, 22 veterans were committing suicide a day, and you had the cure right there. You had a treatment that could have driven that suicide rate down by 99%, and no, you screwed up. You made it illegal. I think that's going to be one of the great tragedies of American history. So in terms of my policy, it's really simple. One, privatize the VA, and by that I mean give every single veteran in America one ownership voting share. Do it on a blockchain. I know we can do this. It's not that complicated. You get all the bureaucrats, politicians, pharmaceuticals, special interests out of the way. You put veterans in charge. You end the drug war. Give us the freedom to medicate how we see fit. I guarantee you're not going to have 20 veteran suicides a day. And really, I don't think any candidate running for president who doesn't have a serious plan to address this should be taken seriously, because this is a national embarrassment that needs to end. The other one, mainly influenced by my background in having gone to the Native American prep school, but really anybody who goes from the government school whitewashed version of American history to say just reading Howard Zinn, getting any kind of honest perspective on treatment of Native Americans, especially even like the Hawaiian Islanders, that story being so written out of mainstream American history is another tragedy. And this is one of the most exciting things about my platform, is that in the process of dissolving the federal government, we give every single tribe in America the right to claim their sovereignty and the ability to give them back whatever property has been stolen by treaty violations, at least that is not being occupied for residential purposes, to be able to give that back to them and say, you know what, this was messed up, to offer not just condolences, but the best that we possibly can today for justice on behalf of Native Americans. That's something about this platform that's very important to me.
So is that a form of reparations to Native Americans? Is that how you would classify it, or?
No. I wouldn't. No, I definitely would not call it reparations. And I don't know if that's a matter of semantics. If someone wants to call what I'm proposing reparations, like, I don't have an objection to it, but it's just justice. A lot of libertarians, I think this is a fair criticism of us as a movement, and it's been a fair criticism of me for most of the time that I've been a libertarian activist, is that if we believe in self-ownership and the non-aggression principle and a Lockean homesteading justly acquired concept of property rights, when we acknowledge that taxation is theft, we can't just say, well, you have to stop stealing from us. It's like, no, you have to give back what's been stolen in order to serve justice. And when we look at the giant Gordian knot of government entanglement of financial histories, to say, well, we're going to give everybody back what's been stolen from them, it's kind of ridiculous. It's not possible. And the best we can do is what I've come up with in giving people back what's been stolen from us, reclaiming our birthright by liquidating the federal government and saying, at very least, we, the people, will take back what has been stolen from us. And the way we're going to do this is with a new cryptocurrency called Americoin. And it's a digital security token. Some people might not call it a cryptocurrency in the truest sense, but it's an immediately functional currency that is your claim as an American to everything that we're auctioning off in the liquidation of the federal government. So you'll get an airdrop of 1,000 Americoin tokens by social security number. Like Bitcoin, it will be a completely transparent public ledger. All of the money will be traceable. And this is also how we get off the fiat currency system and transition to free market money. I don't think any other candidate has a plan that really gets to this. And there's a significant danger that scares me of electing a moderate calling themselves a libertarian to be president of the United States, which then leaves them vulnerable to being blamed for anything that goes bad under their administration. And if you don't change the paradigm first fundamentally, the same power players, the same string pullers are going to be in charge. Someone like George Soros even could come in and tank the U.S. economy and blame it on the libertarian president. I think if we do that, if we get to that point, we kind of deserve what's coming to us, because we have compromised our principles and said, that a person should be president of the United States and should wield this power. And that's not a very libertarian position.
Is there any plank in the Libertarian Party platform that you disagree with? And if so, which ones and why?
I don't think so. It's been a while since I've gone over with a fine-tooth comb and been like, but I'm a voluntarist. I believe in the non-aggression principle, and I love what is often referred to as the Dallas Accord, as it is phrased in the Statement of Principles, that just says, where governments exist, they must be voluntary.
Let's talk about your campaign infrastructure. Who's your campaign manager?
Elijah Gitzarelli from Rhode Island. Great guy. He's been with me for over 2 years in this project. He's been loyal and hardworking and dedicated through good financial times and bad.
Do you have a coordinator in all 50 states?
Most. I at one point we did. I don't want to over describe the situation here. I think we have a couple that are inactive now with coronaphobia season, but we did at one point. We had a presence of at least one person at all the state conventions that did happen, and at all the virtual ones that we've had so far. So, if not every 50 state, I don't want to overstate and say, yeah, we got every 50, everyone locked on now, but certainly about 45.
Great. How much money has your campaign raised so far?
I think the last number was 220 something thousand. At one point, it was 10 times all of the other candidates combined in the Libertarian primary. And it's a lot by Libertarian standards, but it's only because our standards are so low.
So where can people find out more about your campaign? Like your campaign website, your social media, etc.
Well, my main website, to make it easy for people to find me, is thefreedomline.com, thefreedomline.com. You can find me there, and you can find kokeshforpresident.com without having to remember how to spell my funny last name. So we've got that branding advantage there as well. Thefreedomline.com is where you can get my book, Freedom, for free. You can find my YouTube channel with about 80 million views at thefreedomline.com, as well as at Adam Kokesh on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and everywhere else. That's my main website, thefreedomline.com. And as always, I encourage everybody to email me if you want to get more involved with anything I've got going on, whether it's the presidential campaign or Adam versus the Man or our off-grid homestead here, the Garden of Freedom, or Big Igloo Geodesics, or anything else. Adam at thefreedomline.com is the best way to reach me.
Great. So tell me about your social media plan. Which sites do you have a campaign presence as far as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever?
Well, my biggest presence is YouTube, 250,000 subs there. And even there, people say I have possibly the most shadow banned channel when sometimes our videos don't get very many views all of a sudden compared to our subscriber count. It's pretty obvious. Facebook, I switched from using a page where I had like 80,000 followers to my personal page because there was less censorship there, where I've got about 35,000, I think, altogether now. And Twitter, I'm at 56,000 roughly. And that's the only one I at least recently have been sort of organically engaged with beyond more focus on posting content. But that's really the focus of my strategy and how I've been so successful in the past. Oh, I would say Instagram. Instagram's been a really funny one for me. I'm at about 22,000 right there. And I've been flat at 22,000 on Instagram for the last 3 years. Really crazy. Sort of a freak of mathematical possibility. I don't want to complain or sound conspiratorial. I think every libertarian knows that social media censorship is a real thing, but I think I've been very successful in fighting it. And with Adam versus the Man as my media brand, being able to create content in different formats for different platforms. Right now, I'm doing a live show 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and taking clips from that go to Instagram, that go to TikTok, that go to Twitter. Having that just full spectrum engagement, meet people where they're at, bring them in, and then drive them to an email list. And even that is not 100% reliable, but I've got a pretty solid email list of about 20,000 right now. And we're focusing more on building that in order to combat the censorship, to have a more direct way of reaching people. I don't know if that answers your plan. There's so many other elements. When you say, like, what is your social media plan? There are so many other things I could get into in specifics with memes, with groups, with live broadcasts, with comment interaction, things like that. But I'll just say I'm a millennial. I know what I'm doing, Grandpa. I am kind of a digital native, and I am naturally engaged in most platforms and social media. And I owe my success to the great teams that I've had backing me up over the years, and the team that I have with me right now, especially.
Suppose you get the Libertarian Party nomination. Short of getting elected president, do you have any less ambitious goals to use as metrics to judge the success of your campaign? For example, you're trying to maximize votes, sell books, increase party membership, or some other goal?
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned it exactly that way, Chuck. First of all, I am not here to sell books. I am not I do not object to being advantageous for my book to have this presidential campaign, getting it out there more. My book has no intellectual property rights claims. We give it away for free. We sell it for as cheap as we can get away with online. And you can get it in every digital format for free at thefreedomline.com. So I'm more here to give away books and give away merchandise. And that's part of the fun for me. in touring and campaigning. I think you do have to run to win, in order to even just do as well as you can do. And we are running to win. We have a practical plan, unlike any other candidate, that we can carry out on day one and say, yeah, we're going in, we're ready to make this happen. If the American people say this is what they want to happen, we have a realistic, pragmatic plan that starts getting things done on day one to immediately improve everyone's lives. And if you want to get into the policy, I could talk about that by itself for hours, but I really am a policy geek, and I would love to really get into, agency by agency. And one of the big advantages of this platform of localization is that it could be described as 50-state secession, right? All 50 states seceding at the same time. And that allows them to get their share of their stuff back, right? As opposed to just breaking off and letting the federal government keep everything that's been taken from the people of your state. We do it all at once. Everybody gets their stuff back, at least as much as possible in the fair process that I described earlier. And secession is, as of 2014, was polling over 25%. This was before polarization became the big boogeyman of politics. And if we can just be the party of secession, the party of localization, we can get 25%. If we just successfully connected with every American who wants their state to be sovereign, the Libertarian Party would get 25%. If we could run governor, Senate, and congressional candidates on the same platform, then we could have 25% of the Senate and Congress. I know that's an oversimplification of the math, but if we could get 25% of the popular vote in a presidential election, even if we didn't get a single congressional or Senate seat, that would be an epic breakthrough year for the Libertarian Party. Now, 25%, all we have to do is be the secession party for one cycle, at least, and see how many people we get on board. I think secession is very much in line with libertarian values, and it's a great way to reach people without having to argue ideology. Now, I'm not saying 25% is my realistic fallback goal from winning, but that would be very nice, and that is another realistic benchmark. What I see as the more realistic goal is to have a breakout year for the Libertarian Party. Now, that could be different numbers, right? It could be that we only get 5% of the popular vote, but we get, more media than the Democrats or Republicans. Or it could be that we get no media, but we get 20% to make up for it, something like that. And what that does, having that breakout year for the Libertarian Party, means we go from at least a bipolar system to a tripolar system until libertarians win outright and can get rid of all the nonsense polarity. So in 2020, you could say that my fallback goal, if we don't hit this black swan moment, is 10%. And I really do believe that if you nominate someone with this platform or with a similarly meaningful platform with the potential to reach every secessionist in America, to reach so many disaffected voters, then I think, getting 10% is a very reasonable goal. Building on Gary's 3.8%, 3.4%. Chuck, you would know this one.
Not off the top of my head, but it was an impressive showing what he had.
Yeah, and it was a significant advance over what he was able to do in 2012. And I think we're ready for this. I think the groundwork is there so that we can have that full breakout year for the Libertarian Party. I think if we can build on Gary's 3-4%, I think it's 3.8. Man, I feel silly with this number slipping my head right now. But building on what Gary's, I think it was whatever Gary got 3-4%. And if we bring in a good chunk of secessionists and disaffected voters, clearing 10%, if we do our jobs, should be a reasonably easy goal for 2020.
So you mentioned before that you ran for Congress earlier as a Republican. Can you tell us a bit about that campaign? Did you learn some stuff from that campaign? How did you do? What do you wish you did differently?
I learned not to trust Republicans, at least the Republican leadership. I went in with Ron Paul's endorsement and a little bit of his financial support. And I told the Republican Party leadership in New Mexico, like, look, I'm not here to represent the middle of the Republican Party. I'm here representing the Libertarian wing of the Republican Party, which I think is stronger than most places in this district. But more importantly, is the only way that you'll get rid of the Democrat. If you run a good old boy, as you always have been, against Lujan, then you're going to lose. And you'll never turn this district from blue to red. You don't have any chance of doing it. And they said, okay, yeah, we like it. Sounds good. Keep running. And they gave me support as if I was going to be the nominee. And I made the mistake of trusting them in running a general election campaign, talking about my anti-war credentials and my activism credentials. And we got a lot of support from Democrats in the district, but it wasn't enough to win the Republican primary. So they ran a good old boy against me kind of at the last minute. And it was a bit of a dirty character assassination whisper campaign against me. And I think I did respectably in the primary, but didn't win the nomination.
So you mentioned you're a life member of the Libertarian Party. How long have you been a member of the Libertarian Party?
I honestly, I should know, and I'm pretty sure it was from when I was first registered to vote in let's see, I guess it was 2000 when I graduated from high school. Although I don't know if I just registered and didn't join at that point. I think there was some point in college where I formally joined the party before I went to Iraq. But the point that I remember is that in 2004, when I got back from Iraq and it was the first time I could afford it, I bought a lifetime membership, and it was just $1,000 back then. I don't remember how long before that I had already been a member, though.
Have you been active in your state and or county affiliates of the Libertarian Party?
Yep, absolutely. Stood up the Yavapai County LP here before I was banned by the state, because as a felon, I'm not allowed to register to vote, and I'm not allowed to hold one of their official party positions. But I've recruited some good people who have kept the Yavapai County Libertarian Party going. I ran for U.S. Senate as a Libertarian here in Arizona, and I've been to all the state conventions in the last several cycles. I have regularly gone to them. So in Arizona, we're one huge city kind of state with Phoenix, and that's Maricopa County, and so they're the biggest county affiliate, and they're the only ones that have sizable monthly meetings. So when I can time my drives into Phoenix, I go to those meetings, and I do what I can to support the party. I've done some tabling in the area as well at like county fair type events. The last one was a rodeo where you just stand out with a little booth, and world's smallest political quiz and table full of Libertarian Party literature and clipboards. So I think I've got certainly among the candidates today, I've got a very solid party resume.
So that was the first time you mentioned your U.S. Senate run. Can you tell me a little bit more about that campaign?
Yeah, I should really put an asterisk next to that. It was I should barely get credit for it as running as a Libertarian, but I did have my name on the ballot. We did file, we did organize the campaign, and it was a last-ditch attempt that Nick Sarwark and Howard Blitz, the state chair, wanted to recruit someone for, because our candidates for Senate and governor had been kicked off the ballot. And so that was for the primary ballot. And the way it works in Arizona is that if they were on, but their signatures got disqualified, they would be disqualified from being a write-in in the primary. But if you got someone to run in the primary as a write-in candidate, so we organized basically a direct mail and online campaign to get on the ballot, and failed because of the Republican Secretary of State. But it was a fun effort, and I'm glad we did it.
Have you served in any party leadership positions?
Well, I was Yavapai County chair illegally, briefly. I was the chair of the Libertarians of the Claremont Colleges, our college affiliate that I was involved with in Claremont, California for 1 year. And I think that's it for party leadership positions.
Do you vote Libertarian?
Of course. Well, not anymore.
When you could vote, I should say.
Yeah, right. When I was legally allowed to vote. Well, I do want to, make.
Adam, did we lose connection here? We seem to have lost connection. Okay, I'm gonna put him off here. Try to get in contact with him. Okay, let's see. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. Yeah, I'm for sure I'm gonna get him back. I am texting him right now. In the interim, I will direct you to his website, which is Kokesh for President, and his other website, which is thefreedomonline.com. We will get him back. I guess while we're doing that, I should mention that there were a few questions from the audience that I've added to the list here. And when we get to the end of the interview, assuming we have enough time, which I think we will, I will ask him those questions. The questions I have listed so far, someone asked, could you ask him to talk more about shadow banning? I assume that's on YouTube and such. Someone asked, what do his arm tattoos mean? And will they be his campaign slogans? And someone asked, oh, wait, he's back.
Hey,
great.
Just got back. I have no idea what happened that time. Just a connection issue. It just stopped and said connecting. And
okay. Well, it's great to have you back. So let me get back to the questions here. Let's see. So you were just talking about voting as a libertarian and that you have been deprived of your right to vote from the state. Did you want to add more to that, or should we move on to the next question?
Oh, no, I would just say that in 2008, I voted for Cynthia McKinney, who has endorsed me now, which is kind of cool because I've actually converted her to describe herself as an anarcho-capitalist, and wanted to see the Green Party get ballot status in D.C. I was a D.C. resident at the time. And then in 2012, voted for Ron Paul in the primary, and then Gary Johnson in the general, and then by 2016 was no longer allowed to vote, but I would have voted Johnson Weld.
Great. So next question, what if you were elected president, but Congress was solidly Republican or Democrat? Would you be able to enact and implement your agenda with an obstructionist Congress? How would you work with or around those who disagree with you?
That's a great question. I think I'm the only libertarian candidate who has a realistic platform that addresses that issue, because every one of them will have to fight the current system. They're all running to maintain the current system. And in some ways, we'll have to compromise libertarian values in order to do so. And, I would just ask for the libertarian delegates to think, like, do you really want a nominee who you're going to have to make excuses for some form of statism that they're going to be proposing, and then have to fight this absolutely horrific losing battle of convincing people that you are going to be able to actually carry out some meaningful policy without the support of Congress, when, if, like I said, someone like George Soros wants to come in and tank the economy and blame it on the libertarian president or libertarian policy, they're going to be able to do that. With my proposal, what we're suggesting is that the authority of the American people be applied to the higher authority that is the Declaration of Independence, rather than the Constitution, to declare the Constitution null and void. And I've heard people say, well, you can't do that. Congress is going to stop you, or the Supreme Court's going to stop you. And it's like, it's not me doing this. I'm not asking for power from the American people to do things in everybody's name, as the commander-in-chief, as the leader of this unethical government institution. And if the American people say this is how it's going to be, this specifically. Like, we're not going to, we're not going to put up with a Democrat president or a Republican president. We're going to let our states be independent, give Native American tribes their sovereignty and their land back as best we can. Let's localize and decentralize government. If the American people say that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen.
What are President Trump's best and worst executive accomplishments, in your opinion?
Wow. I thought you were going to say nice things about it. Can you say anything nice about Donald Trump? And that's a little easier to say. Yes, I like the natural skin tone around his eyelids. But in terms of actual executive accomplishments, hard to say, because he's always been socialist. He's always favored not just socialized medicine, but perpetuating socialized defense and retirement and insurance and so many other socialist functions of government, and in some ways increased them. But now fascism openly, in the case of coronaphobia, where he's saying that the government is going to buy stock in companies and take control of them, or that restaurants are going to go out of business, but don't worry, they'll come back with new owners. Definition of fascism in terms of the merging of corporations and the state. And then authoritarianism, totalitarianism, him coming out and saying that the president has absolute power. There are a lot of people who have some delusion that Trump is secretly well-intentioned and is draining the swamp and killing pedophiles in the middle of the night with SEAL teams, and everything that Q leaks is true. And it's just ridiculous. We know Donald Trump is in for the super class. Yeah, he can't be bought because he's been paid for by the bankers from the beginning. Look at his history as a businessman, as an entertainer, what he represents. It's all part of the status quo. I was surprised that he ran as a Republican instead of a Democrat, even given his history, but strategically it made sense. So in all of this rambling preamble, I guess the best I could come up with is something that really he gets credit for as an executive accomplishment would be reaching out to North Korea. I think him strolling down the DMZ hand in hand with Kim Jong-un was a really powerful, meaningful sight that it represented a significant contribution to world peace. Obviously not in and of itself, really backed up by a whole lot of policy, but at least by Republican Democrat standards, it was a good start. In terms of the worst that he's done, hard to say, but maybe now declaring a state of emergency over the coronavirus pandemic, that might just qualify as the worst in terms of negatively impacting Americans' lives. And that, you people will argue, well, is it Trump or is it other, is it the governors? Well, the national state of emergency is what made the states of emergencies possible. And I think the economic suffering that we're experiencing right now, the responsibility lies squarely with President Trump.
Tell us what you would do in your first 100 days in office if elected president.
Well, Chuck, it's kind of hard to answer that question as like, these are my priorities and this is what I'd work with Congress on. And if I had the ring of power, this is what I do. No, I think I have an even better answer for that. And it'll go a little more than 100 days, but in explaining the process of how we take the federal government through a bankruptcy process, there's one thing I do with the power of the presidency on day one, and that's pardon everybody I possibly can for victimless crimes, whistleblowers and political prisoners especially. But anybody who we can identify in advance will be named and pardoned. And then we sign one executive order that declares the federal government bankrupt, that declares the Constitution null and void, in which I resign from the presidency to become custodian of the federal government. So all federal laws stop being enforced on day one. That's the big thing. Then we get to go through the process of shutting down the federal government. Some agencies will get localized, like the Department of Transportation, very easy, provides a legitimate service. And every state already has a state Department of Transportation. So cutting it up into 50 pieces, giving the authority out that way, relatively easy process. All the agencies that are going through that kind of dissolution, that happens in the first 100 days. The records then go to a central clearinghouse. We get to release all of the documents. I'm very excited about this. No more secrets, no more lies, but we have to be responsible about it, which means you have to redact personal or private information that the federal government should not have had in the first place. So that's definitely part of this process. Some of the larger agencies, NSA, CIA, FBI, again, I'm grateful to have John McAfee backing me up with the prospect of taking these agencies apart in a responsible way and transferring whatever legitimate functions they have to the states. But for those, it's going to be pretty much straight liquidation. For the U.S. military, certainly within the first 100 days, we'll be able to bring all the troops home from abroad and close all the bases. And then we begin the process of localization, getting us more in line with the founders' vision of a legitimate national defense for this country, namely a decentralized militia-based defense that does not include anything that they would have called a standing army. So the next process is to take the offensive weaponry that gets liquidated, de-weaponized and liquidated. Defensive weaponry gets a portion among the states. And then the bankruptcy process entails paying back the true creditors, the American people. So this gets us back to AmeriCoin and how we're actually going to do that. We are not honoring any of the current federal debt. It is an illegitimate debt. It is a paper debt that is engineered as an excuse to rip you off with the income tax that doesn't even pay the interest on it. So the federal debt that is owed to foreign banks, foreign governments, foreign corporations, we are writing that off in the bankruptcy. That goes away. The true creditors are the American people. And over 10 years' time, we will liquidate all of the assets of the federal government. And that will take that, we will take the funds that we get from that, they will go to fund Social Security as a spun-off institution to provide a bridge for better free market or localized alternatives. And we have a monetary system now that is backed up with the value of the liquidating assets for as long as they're being liquidated. So we've got a 10-year off-ramp from the fiat currency system as we take our stuff back, as we localize government. And while the first 100 days is kind of a nice arbitrary way to ask that question for people who have low expectations, obviously what we are offering with this platform is something a lot more meaningful.
How would a libertarian president have dealt with the coronavirus?
Well, libertarian president to me sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but in terms of if I was president when the corona crisis started, it would be a matter of getting government to do as little as possible. The only active thing I would have government doing is releasing resources that are in the way, such as military resources, resources that the CDC has. But in terms of shutdowns, taking power, anything like that, absolutely not. The main difference, I think, with a libertarian versus an old party president in this situation is that we don't have the secrecy. And that's one of the things that's most dangerous because it creates confusion and that creates fear and that creates doubt. And that makes it easy for people to be manipulated and taken advantage of. So hypothetically, if I was in that role, at least I can tell you I wouldn't do what Donald Trump has and order the CDC to conduct deliberations in private. That in and of itself, just that should be criminal. And I probably need to think that out. How criminal, whatever. It's like asking, a mafia boss to beat his wife less when you say, please don't lie to us while you're stealing from us and murdering innocent people and ruining lives every day. But certainly we would have a better way of sharing information, of treatments getting out, of test kits getting out without FDA restrictions. So again, this is in the category of getting government to not do things or to stop doing things or to do less of things. And certainly we see the negative consequences of government intervention in the healthcare industry in so many ways around coronavirus, from not allowing doctors to practice across state lines, to tests not being readily available, to the misinformation, and you get government out of all those functions, you're going to have a much better response.
So we're broadcast on what's primarily a gaming website where people stream their games.
Twitch, right?
Tell me about your hobbies. Do you play any video games or board games or card games, or how else do you spend your free time apart from political activism?
Well, I'm kind of a nerd about that when it comes to card games. Chuck, how long are we going today? I had this for an hour, but I want to do something really fun to wrap up to show people if you're up for it.
I had a schedule for 2 hours. Are you saying you could only go to 6?
Oh no, I mean I can keep going. It's
Okay,
not
good,
a big deal. But if we could show people around here, remind me then, when we get to the end of these.
Oh,
Like I
sure.
said,
I
yeah,
have plenty of time. If you want to give us a tour, that would be fun. Sure.
yeah. Remind me at the end. I'll pick up the camera and we'll walk around here a little bit.
Okay.
That's why I'm in my field. I'm in my construction clothes right now because I've been out doing stuff today. So since you mentioned card games, there are two I got to point out, and one of them is super nerdy. It's called Set, and it's the family game of visual perception. I'm a total dork about it. It's not a big deal, but it's a fun little card game I like to play. The other card game is Cards Against Humanity. I'm definitely more into that. Although I should say I used to be a bit of a poker player. It's been years though.
I think I played poker with you years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we played in Vegas, didn't we?
No. I think we played it at Mike Owen and Rachel Mill's house at one point.
Yeah. There are a lot of good little libertarian poker games out there. I ran one in Virginia for a while when I was living there. And there was a time I made more money playing poker than as a sergeant in the Marines. So I could say I was briefly at least a professional poker player. But my main hobby outside of politics and activism is homesteading, and that's everything around homesteading, alternative construction, especially earthships, building off-grid self-sustainable homes, earth bags, straw bale, cob, cordwood. I've studied all of it, underground. Here we're building with geodesic domes, and that's why I want to show people that. We'll do that at the end, something to tease ahead. So everything around that, working with my hands, building stuff. It's to me what I have here is with 10 acres in the mountains in Arizona, kind of like the ultimate palette for me to or a canvas rather for me to paint on. And I'm building. I'll show you guys at the end. We'll take the camera outside. And I'll show you the one bedroom dome house that I'm building and a little bit more of the property where I live here.
Fantastic. So what are your campaign's target demographics? Would your outreach lean conservative, liberal, or in some other direction? What sorts of people would you reach out to? Did I lose you again? You seem to have frozen.
No. Oh, sorry. Hold on.
I can still hear you, but your video has frozen.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh, there. Yeah, now I see you.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's a little presumptive for a libertarian nominee to answer that question decisively. So I'm going to answer with a lot of really amazing possibilities instead. When you say, does it reach, is my message designed or my campaign designed to go left or right? It's definitely neither of those things. In proper libertarian spirit, that does transcend the left-right spectrum, and it really is with localization. The everybody gets what they want strategy. If you want government to be more this way or that way, well, you get more of what you want when it's localized, customized, transparent, accountable, as opposed to centralized. And so there are some people who say, like, we need to reach out to the left more. And I would agree that we have more low-hanging fruit on the left at this point, in the sense that Ron Paul got us everybody from the right who was, readily inclined to libertarianism. And so I would have an eye to that, but I wouldn't be, exclusively pursuing that or at the expense of any other demographic. The other thing is secessionists, and this is something especially with California right now that's very exciting with the independent Cal exit movement, I should say is the best way of identifying it. And getting at, I think the best target for us really is secessionists. If that doesn't prove to be the case, then I think the next would be, traditional non-voters who are disaffected, and you can't rely on all of them. They are non-voters for a reason, obviously, but to be offering something fundamentally different. One of the things that I have heard a lot on the campaign trail, although not as much anymore that we're on, this weird partial shutdown now, but what I used to hear a lot of was, I don't normally vote, but I would come out and vote for that. And that is the most reassuring thing about my campaign. So I think every group that is, underrepresented in mainstream politics is someone that, we as libertarians should be deliberately going after. There are a lot of other strategies that I think this campaign applies to for demographics, for who to reach out to, for why we have coalition groups right now is a big part of our campaign. Exotic entertainers for Kokesh, gun owners for Kokesh, GSM, gender and sexual minorities for Kokesh, first responders for Kokesh. I hate to leave people out, but the big stoners for Kokesh, Christians for Kokesh. The other big one is victims of family law. And I think that's a really big one where you just think about that term for a second, victims of family law. Anybody who's been through a bad divorce, a child of divorce, or worried about their kids being taken by CPS, or been affected by someone in their immediate family going through something like that. It's pretty much every American at this point, and it's an issue that is very much under addressed. I guess that would be my third pet issue. If you want to take localization out and make me pick a third, it would be family law and family rights and parental alienation. The way that we do divorces and custody battles in this country is a truly needless source of suffering.
Tell us about your foreign policy.
Define foreign policy.
How should the president deal with other countries and the military and so forth?
Well, and by that definition, I don't have one, because I think the foreign policy of the United States should be based on peaceful relations through non-government actors. We shouldn't have a violent, coercive representative claiming to represent us on the world stage at all. We should have all of our representatives be through voluntary, consensual relationships with consent of everybody involved, not non-consensual relationships where at very best you have, in a democracy, the will of the majority being forced on the minority. So if it's if you define foreign policy as what government does to people outside of our borders, then we shouldn't have one. We should only have people who are peaceful, who are committed to free trade, who are committed to honest commerce and peaceful interaction. Those are the only people who should ever in any way be representing us outside of any national borders.
As president, what is the proper constitutional role of executive orders? What would you accomplish through executive orders, if anything?
Well, just the one to dissolve the federal government. I don't think there is an appropriate role. Should government do what X? No. The question is then, what is government? And it is a violent, coercive institution that, if we're going to keep it at all, it needs to transition to something that is voluntary, that is peaceful, that is in line with libertarian ethics. And the way that we do that is localization. And it's a great kind of end run around this wall that we as libertarians have been butting our heads against for years of, well, we've got to convert everyone, or we've got to win them over on this issue and that issue. And it's like, no, we don't. It's really one issue at the heart of libertarianism, and it's love, it's peace, it's self-ownership, it's the non-aggression principle. And if we can say, look, it's not about this issue or that issue, let's unite and take issue with people setting policy from us from hundreds of miles away. This is crazy. And that's how we get to unite people in a broader sense that takes the Libertarian Party from being a debate club to being a real political coalition.
What would you do about climate change?
I would encourage all peaceful solutions possible and make sure that there are that it is never used as an excuse for violent solutions through coercive government.
What kind of judges would you appoint? So the president currently has the authority to appoint judges to the Supreme Court,
Right.
the circuit courts, and the federal district courts. Right. What kind of judges would you appoint? And do you have a short list for the Supreme Court?
I would not be appointing any judges because I would be resigning on day one. My election by the American people represents a referendum decision of us saying the federal government should not exist anymore, and that Adam should be the guy to go ahead and carry out this bankruptcy process that he's proposing.
So I ask every candidate about the debt crisis. How should we handle the debt and the deficit? it seems like you've already answered it, but you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't use the word I guess I would use when describing it, which is repudiation. So do you think the debt should be
Yeah.
repudiated?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the when you say repudiation to mean completely disregarded and declared invalid. Yeah, absolutely. The debt that we are calling the national debt today is not a legitimate debt. And I've heard other libertarian candidates say we have to pay down the debt, and it's like, what? You mean you're going to steal from us some more to pay to these corrupt people who screwed us over through the government and now have this insane price tag on the butt of every baby born in America? In the hundreds of thousands of dollars, it says you're going to have to pay for stuff that you never had a say in. No, the national debt is a form of intergenerational child abuse, forcing future generations to pay for things they never had a say in, enslaving them to the people we were enslaved to because we accepted their debt in the first place. So no, we cannot pass that on to our children.
So I have another question that I asked to all of the candidates that I think will be a little different for you, which is Republicans and Democrats have a large pool to tap to fill the executive branch for the appointees. How would you
Right.
staff your departments? Do you have anyone in particular in mind for the cabinet level and below? I guess in your case, I mean, you could answer
Well,
that
yes,
question as is,
actually.
but also do you have people in mind who would help you implement this bankruptcy process, who have expertise in that area that you have in mind?
Yes, absolutely. And we have at different times in the campaign considered putting together a kind of shadow cabinet because we are putting together a cabinet, but it would be not a secretary of X, but a custodian of X. Just like I am no longer the president, I am the custodian of the federal government as the bankruptcy agent. You would not be the director of whatever agency, you would be the custodian and you would have a very clear mandate for overseeing the bankruptcy process of that agency. And as I mentioned before, I'm very excited to have John McAfee and his experience backing me up in this. And to have him taking apart the NSA or the CIA, obviously, there'd be a lot of fun in that. To get Ed Snowden, perhaps, as the custodian of the NSA would be a way to get him on board with this team. We have a great activist, Mark Edge, with Free Talk Live, who has volunteered to be our head of the Bureau of Prisons. I know that's going down one level from the cabinet, but as based on his experience, it's something that he would want to oversee. A lot of, in terms of transitioning offenders to state facilities or releasing them if they're victimless criminals. And there have been a variety of proposals for people to carry out these plans for different agencies. I'm confident that I have the core team, especially now with John McAfee, that we would be able to oversee the right set of professionals carrying out the bankruptcy process for each agency. But we definitely have some room to go filling them out. And we don't have the same kind of farm team that Democrats and Republicans have of people in their network of favors.
So you've talked a lot about John McAfee. So I asked each candidate if they received the party nomination, do they have a preference for their running mate? It sounds like you do. Could you tell us a bit more about John McAfee?
Well, actually, I have several, and John McAfee is just at the top of the pile for me right now, especially if he's able to come back to the United States with winning the nomination. John McAfee, by McAfee Antivirus, a company he sold out before it became the annoying, impossible to install thing that it did. And I guess it's not real. I don't know if it's really a thing anymore. But McAfee Antivirus, he started, got very rich, sold out, and has gotten into cryptocurrency pretty heavily since then. So having his up. Oh, and I should mention, I'm not just having him on board for the Americoin project, but I also have Alistair Cathnis, who has done Zion Coin, which is a tokenization for the oil and gas industry, and he has some very relevant experience for that in terms of the team that we're bringing to this already. John McAfee ran for the party's nomination in 2016. I endorsed him then against Gary Johnson and Austin Peterson and Darryl Perry. Obviously, Gary ended up being the nominee who I endorsed for the general. And, John McAfee is now avoiding IRS charges in Eastern Europe, and is under a very unfortunate legal circumstance where he was running for president with Libertarian Party, still is, but hasn't been able to tour like he did last year, to go to debates and go to conventions because of this legal challenge. But if he gets the nomination, the idea that he might be able to just come back into the United States as the vice presidential nominee and do that in civil disobedience is a really exciting possibility. And I understand if a lot of libertarians wouldn't want him at the top of the ticket, and I understand that, and I hope that putting myself forth as the nominee with this specific plan is an appropriate alternative, because of some of the risk that goes with John McAfee. But with no risk comes no reward, and I think that what John McAfee offers to the party, especially being humble enough to say that he is running for the vice presidential nomination this time, which is actually what I was hoping Lincoln Chafee was going to do. That John McAfee is offering his skills, his expertise, his experience, his online presence to the Libertarian Party. I think that's really just an amazing thing. Larry Sharp, who I quoted earlier, also a good friend of mine, great principled libertarian. If the party decides that he's going to be the vice presidential nominee, then I would love to run with him. But he doesn't, and he's a great messenger. He also a Marine Corps veteran. It'd be kind of cool to have a team with 2 Marines, but he's got a solid professional background with his business in New York, and I think he'd be a great nominee as well. Also, Arvin Vohra or Dan Berman, and I think because they both represent a distinctly principled platform with what they're proposing of turning the federal government into a voluntary institution, I think both of them would be great messengers for my policy, and they've both privately expressed to me that that they're they have their own policy, their own that they prefer, but yeah, they'd have no problem advocating for dissolving the federal government.
If you lost the LP nomination, would you accept the nomination for vice president?
Only if we had a presidential candidate with the same ethical principles that, to me, are the definition of libertarianism. And that's, I've singled out John McAfee and Dan Taxation Steph Berman and Arvin Vohra in that category. I think there are a lot of great candidates, and they would all be better than Cheeto Jesus or the Kid Sniffer, but they're not they're not really fundamentally offering a true alternative to the current system. They're all saying, I've got a better plan for being president. I'll be a kinder, gentler tyrant. And I think the American people are looking for something fundamentally different. But I would never sign up to be like it's like if you ask me, Adam, would you be Donald Trump's vice president? No, for a lot of reasons. One is that I wouldn't want to help him in his policy, but that if he died, I'm saying that I would be president and generally carry out that policy direction. I cannot in good conscience put on a corrupt ring of power that I know needs to go directly into the fire, nor can I in good conscience run as a candidate proposing that I might be in a position to do that.
What should government do about healthcare?
Nothing. What should government do about healthcare? Stay out of it. Get as far away as possible. There are a lot of things I could break down in that, but no, I mean, I'm a voluntarist. Whatever voluntary systems people come up with, government should have nothing to do with healthcare whatsoever.
Which former U.S. president did you admire the most?
Oh, favorite former U.S. president.
Former or current? Which? Not that it would necessarily be Trump. But.
Right? No. I think asking that question is kind of like asking what's your favorite kind of cancer. I suppose I could cite Jefferson, but even in his presidency, he was quite the hypocrite with a number of policies: the Barbary Pirate Wars, the maintenance of slavery. But in terms of the rhetoric and writing the Declaration, All right, I'll let Jefferson take credit for that. He gets to be my favorite today.
What politician, living or dead, did you admire the most?
Ron Paul, easy. For what he's accomplished in terms of bringing people to the message with his presidential campaigns, and it really wasn't just the campaigns, but the enduring effect. For people like me who ended up reading Rothbard as a result and getting a much deeper understanding of the message.
If you could change one government policy, what would it be?
The existing of government part, is that a policy? Well, government has a policy that it should exist. I think it should change that.
Do you have any endorsements of your presidential campaign that you're proud of and want to highlight?
Yeah, well, Cynthia McKinney, I already mentioned. John McAfee, those are the two big ones. And I would just point out that I was endorsed by Ron Paul when I ran in 2010.
Of the prior Libertarian Party presidential campaigns, which most closely resembles the campaign you want to run and why?
That's a great question, but I don't think I've ever thought of it in those terms because what we are doing is fundamentally different with this platform. Harry Brown was a great candidate. Michael Bednarik was a great candidate. I don't think the messaging strategy of nominating a libertarian-leaning moderate, as they're called, or as Mark Whitney would call them, a pre-sold Republican. No, that wasn't the term. Certified pre-owned Republican. Yeah, I'm talking about Justin Amash. And,
well, you did
I
run
like
for Congress as a Republican.
Yeah, no. I lost because I wouldn't let the the Republican Party leadership own me, and certainly, I would never be described as a washed-up Republican. I wish I wish I had won, and you could call me that now. But no, I don't. I don't have that that particular burden of credibility.
I think we may have lost you again. I don't hear you, and the picture seems frozen. Are you there, Adam? I'm gonna turn this off. Is it the Zoom? I'll try texting you again. Had more technical problems here than some of the other ones. Sorry to the viewers about that. I'll try to get Adam back. In the interim, as I said, I am, Zoom call hung up. He's gonna try calling back. In the interim, I'll mention that I am writing down questions from the audience. Someone had asked, he wants to know whether he plans to introduce audit the Fed. Someone had asked, he asked about values-based policy versus outcomes data, empirical policy. Someone had asked, if elected president, what would he do with respect to North Korea and a nuclear Iran? Someone asked, what is the libertarian position on abortion? And someone asked if you could expand on the a libertarian family law. What would that look like? And finally, someone asked, should the states then dissolve the state governments after the federal government dissolves the federal government? And hopefully we'll have time to get to those questions. I'm going to try to get Adam back on the line here.
Hey.
Oh, okay. Looks like he's back. Let's get him back on video here. All right, great. We can see you again, Adam.
Yeah, that was odd.
Okay. So let's see. What were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about prior Libertarian Party presidential campaigns, and you were talking about Harry Brown and Michael Bednarik.
Yeah. And no, I would just say that there are candidates who I have, of course, Ron Paul in back to '88. Mary Ruwart, who didn't win the nomination in 2008. There are a lot of whom, a lot of candidates whom I admire in Libertarian Party history, but I wouldn't say that we're modeling our campaign after any of them. I think what we are doing is fundamentally different in the localization platform in a way that requires a unique strategy, and that's what we've built.
So, apart from your own book, what are a few of your favorite libertarian books?
Definitely Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard. That was the one that got me to the bottom of the rabbit hole. Economics in One Lesson, Henry Hazlitt was a big one. End the Fed by Dr. Paul, for the understanding of the Federal Reserve System. There's so many that are kind of glancing at libertarianism as opposed to full blown manifestos. Obviously, Atlas Shrugged was influential on me, as it was for so many libertarians. Edward Abbey, as more of a left anarchist writer in my youth, I read a lot of his work, the Monkey Wrench Gang, Vox Clementis and Deserto. I don't want to leave anyone out if I start naming names, like
you don't have to name your whole bookshelf. I think we got a good sampling of it.
So what I'm tempted to do here is like I go get my so when I was touring for the book Freedom, I don't know if you remember this, Chuck, but when I was doing the speech like in another city every night, I had a memorized list of 20 authors, and I would just rattle them off. And I didn't retain it, but I have it even more. It's in my book, and the thank you page has a list of all of them, so people can check that out online if they want to see more of it.
So I will insert an editorial comment. One of my gripes about Gary Johnson when he ran in 2012, I asked him, like, what are some of your favorite libertarian books? And his response was, well, I'm campaigning full time. I don't have time to read. So then I asked him the same question in 2016, and he gave me the same response. And my thought was, what have you done the past 4 years when not campaigning? That's a great time to pick up some libertarian books, but apparently not for him. So I'm hoping we can get a candidate who's a little more well-read.
Chuck, since you mentioned it that way, that brings me to my one gripe really about Gary. Because I mean my one big problem, and I say this with love and respect for everything that Gary has done for the cause and for his integrity as a person, but that he was the nominee in 12 and knew that he wanted the nomination in 16, that we gave him that title, and he didn't do anything with it. He could have built the party. He could have at least said, all right, I'll do a couple interviews a week. I'll set up a little webcam in the corner of my house in Santa Fe and coordinate with the party national press secretary. That would have been great to have the guy who was the Libertarian nominee for president actively engaged in the American political conversation in some way. And what did he do? He went out and rode bicycles and climbed mountains. Good for him, but that's not someone who's really in it for the cause, who really believes in it. And I saw him asked in one of the state convention debates, what's your take on the non-aggression principle? And he says, it goes over my head. And I think it does for most Americans too. And it's like, you can recognize that an idea is not something that is mainstream messaging and still get it and know that it's a very important idea to libertarians. It really at the heart of our messaging. And I don't think it's that complicated. The non-aggression principle, don't hit, don't steal, don't kill, unless you're a cop or a soldier or a politician. Those are universal human ethics. It's pretty simple. Respect for basic respect for human rights, and that he didn't have that, I think revealed really his primary weakness as a candidate. And it's not that I'm not one of these, there's only one true libertarian, or if you don't think that you're the only real libertarian, you're not a real libertarian. I'm not one of those guys. But obviously you have to have some understanding of some deeper principle. You have to have some understanding of what freedom means in a deeper way beyond politics than just, well, I'm a libertarian because, these issues, I'm socially liberal and fiscally conservative.
So that kind of ties into my next question, which is, why are you the best candidate to build the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement?
I have the best record of spreading the message, hands down. That's it. The only person that has more of a social media presence than me is John McAfee, and most of that is not from libertarian activism. It's from from cryptocurrency activism, which is great that we can bring that in. But in terms of just proof of effectiveness of spreading the message and waking people up, that has to be at the core of any libertarian campaign that has any of these bigger objectives. If it's to get votes or raise money or build the party, if you're not getting out and spreading the right message effectively, then it doesn't matter how many votes you get, doesn't matter how much money you raise, but you have to be able to do that effectively. And in terms of money raised so far, in terms of campaign organization, in terms of social media presence, following, mainstream media interviews, independent media interviews, like I said, except for John McAfee on a couple of points, I'm head and shoulders above the rest of the competition.
Have you spoken with policy experts at libertarian think tanks, and do you have policy experts advising your campaign?
I did for the book bring in a lot of people for specific sections, and was grateful to have two highlights. I'll share names you might know: Bob Murphy on the economic analysis and Stefan Kinsella on intellectual property. And I've talked to a lot of people about developing my worldview over the years and coming to the conclusion of localization, decentralization of government being the way forward for freedom and for America, really for the world. And I've learned that there are different needs that I have in consulting than I would have as someone saying, I'm going to be president and I'm going to be the best president you could have, and a better central planner, where that person has a burden of keeping the system going. In terms of what I seek in consulting now, it's more in how do we actually successfully decentralize, abolish the system. So as I mentioned, Alistair Cathnas for Americoin with the cryptocurrency expert, and John McAfee in terms of the corporate experience, and I guess really I should be saying Donald Trump. He's been through a lot of big bankruptcies, right? Let's get him on board. I think if we won the nomination, or if we won, when we win the presidency on this, and I will say for the benefit of the fellow delegates to the LNC who might be watching, that I understand it's going to take a black swan for a libertarian to win in 2020. Well, we might be in the middle of that black swan right now, but what we should be looking for in 2020 is who is most likely to get us to that point of having a breakout year where we are taken seriously from now on, where we are unignorable, where we put libertarianism squarely inside the middle of the Overton window. We blow it wide open, and all of our ideas have to be discussed and confronted, and everybody who opposes us as a statist has to have a reasonable response, and there aren't very many really, to libertarianism, and take it to the next level. I think with everything I've done, I'm uniquely qualified to do that.
If you receive the nomination, will you campaign full-time for the general election, or will this be a part-time thing?
Absolutely full-time. No competition with anything else.
What kind of a campaign will you run? Will you travel a lot and do speaking events, or will you run a media-focused campaign? Will you campaign with down-ticket Libertarian Party candidates?
Well, it's both. To answer your first question, Chuck, and I don't know if this is a good time to wrap it up and go outside, but we are in the No Force One studios here, and this is a curtain on my bus in my RV, and I can get dressed up in a suit when I need to for debates and mainstream media appearances, and get all professional in here. But what the other thing is, we can do Adam versus the Man from here, and that's what I've been doing. My goal with that is to get a trailer for a mobile studio and be able to go on the road with the campaign and maintain our current status with media production. So I'm going to throw my sunglasses on here, Chuck, and if you want to hit me with the lightning round for the rest of the questions after this,
Sure.
Feel free. I'm not avoiding anything, and I'm very accessible. A lot of libertarians go, "Oh, he's the celebritarian in the race." Well, most libertarian party activists around the country already have my cell phone number. If you email me and you have a reason to chat, I love text messaging. I'm very easy to get a hold of. I'm very accessible. I have help, but I still see my own emails to adam@thefreedomline.com. And one of the unique things that oh wow, hold on a second. Ernie Hancock is here. Just pulled up. See, this is why I thought we were only going an hour. We had a little bit more time. But here, I'm here outside of No Force One. So we'll do this real quick, and then maybe we'll see if Ernie Hancock or freedomsphoenix.com wants to join us. But here it is. I think you can see, it's a little bright out here, but you can see pretty well in the background, our bus, No Force One. You know, we were touring in this before the coronaphobia crisis hit. And one of my team members came up with this joke, Adam, you should be telling people, look, it doesn't matter if they only like you half as much as their favorite candidate, because you're going to work twice as hard. You're going to be twice as effective. This is what you do. You tour and you get out and you hustle and you talk to people and you meet people and you go to events. And so I'd like to do both. I'd like to do media in the morning and events in the evening and interviews in the afternoon. I guess that would be all three. And there's my fiance, Sam. I don't know if you can see her in the shot there, Chuck. And this is Ernie Hancock. Look at this. You really lucked out with this interview today with the timing. This is Ernie Hancock getting off the Love bus that's about to get a paint job for the vaccine awareness tour that he's going on. But he's the reason we have all of this equipment here. And this is the 28-foot dome that I told you I'm building into a house. We've got a greenhouse dome, a chair that we made, a bunch of other domes, and cool art installation back there, the orange ball. I don't know if you can see that. And then I've got my shipping container and my workshop. And, you know, I've been on the road, you know, most of the last 2 years, just to get back to your question for the campaign. And I haven't gotten to spend much time here building this place out, but it's very important to me. And, you know, for something as meaningful or important as running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president, that's really the only thing that would take me away from this place. I really love it. I live on, 11 acres in the mountains of Arizona, totally off grid. And to me, this is a really important representation of living libertarian values. If you're, you know, just another 70-year-old white dude in a suit as the Libertarian nominee, and you've got a regular job and you know, regular house and a mortgage and a typical life, people are going to look at that and be like, well, you're saying we should do things totally different, but you're doing things just like everybody else. I think the American people have a pretty good, you know, bullshit detector. They have a lot of tolerance for bullshit too, which is why we have Donald Trump and why we have the two-party system. The Libertarians, if we're going to change it, we have to do better. We have to put forth someone as a nominee who really lives their values. And I think that's another huge advantage that I have in this race, and as something that I offer to the Libertarian.
Did we lose you again, Adam? I can't hear you, and your camera seems to have frozen. Let's see if we can get Adam back. Gonna close that for now. Gonna text him again. So for the people at home, I have one more question from my prepared list, and then I was going to ask these questions from the audience. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back. I think his campaign team may have miscommunicated the length of the interview. I did say 2 hours initially. We're about at the 2 hours mark right now, about 5 minutes short. Walter asks, this is internet through free air satellite. I don't know. That's something I could ask him about. But I hope he gets better internet if he wins the nomination. We've gotten quite cut off a few times here. Not sure if he's coming back because he wanted to wrap it up, but I have texted him. So from the audience, I have 9 questions from the audience. I have one more question myself. If we can get him back, we'll try to do like a lightning round of 30 seconds a question. If we can't get him back in a couple minutes, we might have to just end there, unfortunately. Let's see if they're... We'll start looking for who we can raid, I guess. If anyone has any suggestions of who to raid a political streamer, I'm open to that. And yeah, so Zoom has disconnected us. I'll check my email to see if I have anything from him. But I'm hoping we can get Adam back to wrap things up. The last time that we lost connection, he came back relatively quickly. So not entirely sure what's going on. Thank you to everyone for sticking around and watching. Guess I could try calling him rather than texting him. Another option. Yeah, I hope it has been informative. Would like to get to all the questions, but I guess maybe it's not to be. I'm gonna try giving him a call. Put him on speaker here. See if we can get a hold of him.
Hey there. Sorry I couldn't take your call. Please text me if you want to get a hold of me.
Okay. Well, that didn't work. I guess we will prepare a raid. Because it's looking like he will not be back and forth. Oh wait, maybe that's him. Okay. Hey Adam, can you hear me?
Hey, what's up? Yeah, Chuck, what's wrong, man? I was connected with the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
And it just cut you off. At
Yeah.
what point did it cut off?
Well, you were giving us a tour. I mean, I guess we got cut off about like 3 minutes ago, something like that. If you could get back on the Zoom, I do have a few more questions for you. But if you want to wrap it up here, we could do that too. So let me know how you want to proceed.
Well, I don't want you to think that I'm avoiding questions, but I have this on my calendar for an hour.
Okay.
And now I've got a bunch of people here waiting for me.
Okay. So let's just end there then.
Okay. Unless there was some like incredible gotcha question or something you had to ask that you
No,
didn't get to.
I had one more question on my prepared list, and then I had about 9 questions from the audience for like a lightning round. But if you need to end there, we can end there.
Can we do a follow-up? Can we get with Marcus and we'll do like another hour or 30 minutes?
Yeah, I can contact Marcus instead of a follow-up. So let's do that then.
Thank you, man.
All right, thanks so much. Have a great day, and thanks for sitting down with me. All right, bye.
Of course.
All right, have a great day. Bye. Okay, well, thanks everyone for watching. We'll try to schedule a brief follow-up. I got through most of the things, but we could go another, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes with him. So let's find someone to raid. I think I'm gonna raid Dylan Burns, who is left-leaning, but he's I I've seen him on a lot of political streams. So let's give him a raid. Let me just double check real quick. There's no other political streamers I know about. Oh, actually, maybe no. Let's raid Dylan. So I'm gonna raid Dylan. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll try to schedule a follow up with Adam to answer like the last 10 questions. And sorry for the miscommunication with this campaign about the length of the interview. But I really appreciate everyone watching, and I hope everyone has a great night. Bye.